Hi, everyone, and welcome back. And welcome for those that are new to this podcast. This is Dr. Shirlea North from North Star Physical Therapy. And for this podcast, we are going to revisit a older topic that I recorded quite a few months ago. And it was one of my first podcasts. So hopefully this one's a little bit better put together. But we're going to continue the discussion of Kegels. All right. There is a huge wave of, or separation, or maybe we want to call it a spectrum of whether or not we should be doing Kegels or not for our pelvic floor. In my last podcast, I was really trying to put out there that Kegels aren't for everyone, and it may have seemed a little bit more anti-Kegel, 100% anti-Kegel, but as research comes out and we are all within the medical field, or for those that are in the medical field, we have to be continuously learning, continuously seeing and reading and updating ourselves with the new research and educating ourselves and being able to take that topic, to take that concept and apply it. And that's what makes our clinical mind so valuable. We need to be able to apply it to the appropriate person in the appropriate situation for whatever goals or whatever we're working on. I wanted to continue this debate or discussion of to Kegel or not to Kegel. There is a camp of folks that are anti-Kegel. And back up and redefine Kegels. So Kegels are named after a man, go figure, women parts or female parts being named after men. So that's a whole different podcast and debate. But Kegels are the scientist, the person that pretty much said, yes, when we activate or when we turn on or when we contract the pelvic floor muscle group, that is what we're going to now deem a Kegel because they saw the brilliant idea. But it's really what we want to, I think, now move forward with is it is a muscle group that is turning on, that's contracting, that's activating and relaxing. So I think to do a full contraction, you want to bring on a full relaxation of the muscle group. And we want to also appreciate that this muscle group within our pelvic floor is very unique. It is uniquely shaped. It's shaped like a bowl that attaches the front of your pelvis to the back of your pelvis and from side to side. So it's quite literally like bowl shaped there. It has many functions, and you definitely have gotten into that before. One of which is stabilizing the pelvic bones, supporting the organs for urinary, bowel, and sexual function. So in acting as a sump pump or as a muscle pump action for the lymphatics within the pelvis. So really important functions for this one muscle group, that like your biceps and your triceps and your abs and your quads and your glutes don't really have that same kind of function, right? So this is a very unique group. And the majority of the muscle fibers that make up this muscle group are what we call low twitch muscle fibers. And so those are muscle fibers that are for like endurance, right? They turn on and they stay on to help with that support and that stability. And those are like endurance fibers. And then the other small chunk of the muscle fibers that make up this group are fast twitch muscle fibers. And those are the ones that like you really want to voluntarily turn on, and it's like a quick thing, almost like that sprint. Or so in this case, in this muscle group, we want the slow twitch muscle fibers to turn on and engage and stay on. It might be not like max contraction, right? But they're kind of on and some like kind of steady state activation to keep that support of our organs. And also we want to make sure that we can turn on those fast twitch muscle fibers for when we like laugh, cough, or sneeze, that's giving us a little bit more oomph so we don't leak. But in that leakage example, we also want to appreciate that sometimes a muscle activation isn't what we need there. Okay. So just because if we're leaking, that doesn't mean those muscle fibers are weak. It can make sense for some folks, but we also want to appreciate that when a muscle group is tight or has a lot of tension, we can't call upon those muscle fibers anymore to do their full contraction. So for example, if you're doing like a full bicep curl, right, you have your elbow extended straight, and you curl all the way up so your hand meets your shoulder. That's a full range of motion. Let's say that bicep is really tight and you get stuck right around halfway in the curl, about 90 degrees, about halfway up, it gets stuck. It's tight. Well, now try to call upon that muscle group. If it's really tight, you can't keep going, right? So same concept that if your pelvic floor muscle is tight, we're not going to be able to call fully upon it for that muscle contraction, for that Kegel. And so therefore, some folks have a tight muscle group that we need to relax in order to call upon that full muscle contraction. So this is where Kegels are for everyone. I believe I'm not like an anti-Kegel, and they're like, absolutely nobody does Kegels. But I'm also not somebody that is, Kegels need to be for every single body, like no matter what. I'm a moderate, and I'm like in the middle. I think it's really case by case basis here, where that's why I do what I do. That's why we assess this muscle group in different positions. So what I assess for lying down on your back is going to be different than when we assess it on our floors, when we assess it standing up. And yes, I do that. I do standing pelvic floor assessments. So I talk about it in the clients, I use the models, we do all the things, all consent, we're all going to, it's going to look a little funny, but the reason behind is we need to see when this muscle group is in full function, in the position that you have symptoms. We need to see what's going on. Is there tension? Is there laxity? Is it loose? Is it really like too flexible? And we need to call upon it. I think another great group of clients that I use isolated pelvic floor muscle contractions, aka Kegels, are people that are like immediate postpartum, that those tissues had to stretch. For example, like a vaginal delivery. And even if it went into a C-section, those tissues, we still should have been prepping those tissues to be as flexible as possible and as strong as possible, but flexible. And with the ligament laxity, with the hormones, things are nice and flexible in preparation for that birth, no matter which way you go. But especially those that ended up delivering vaginally, those tissues stretched a lot, like 300 to 400 times the normal length to deliver a baby, right? So we may need to encourage some muscle contraction just to get that neuromotor connection going, to establish that connection and awareness with our pelvic floor muscles, so that we can help reduce any postpartum urinary symptom like urinary incontinence and things like that. So that's one example of somebody that I may prescribe Kegels. I'm very prescriptive. I tell you how many sets, how long we hold it for. Do we do the fast contraction? Do we do the slow and hold contraction? What position that you're in? It's really a prescription. And that's what pelvic floor physical therapists should be doing. We should be prescribing our exercise in that way, just like how your physician might prescribe, a medication with a certain dosage. We're prescribing this dosage in a certain way for certain reasons because we did an internal assessment. So let's give this debate a rest too, or it was my little soapbox for the Umsella chairs. So these are chairs that a lot of providers, have now purchased for their clinic. So for example, I literally had a client yesterday that told me that their plastic surgeon, someone who did not do an internal pelvic exam, but a plastic surgeon bought an Umsella chair, so that way they can start advertising that, we will help out your urinary leakage. Go ahead, client, sit on this chair, pay us thousands of dollars because you're going to sit in this chair for X amount of minutes and you're just going to sit there. You're going to sit there, you're going to have either clothes on, or maybe if it's in a private setting, maybe it's their underwear or it's like a sheet just for hygiene. And you're just going to sit there and you're going to get Kegels being delivered to the pelvic floor in that sitting position. And the technology will help stimulate those muscles so that you're doing tens of thousands of Kegel muscle contractions for the 5 minutes that you're going to sit in that chair. And they charge you thousands of dollars because you're going to do it multiple times. You're going to do it multiple sessions. The reason why this is so enticing is because the layman person is going to be like, oh, all I have to do is just sit and my muscles are going to get stronger because this electrical stimulation is going to stimulate that area and give me the Kegel, so I don't have to do anything. Sure, sign me up. Guys, we have got to be better with our body, with ourselves. So let's break this down a little bit. This is where Kegels are not appropriate for everybody. That electrical stimulation is not for everybody. And I asked the client, I'm like, did they do a pelvic exam before they prescribed you to sit in a chair? No. And how many sessions are they recommending? They said at least like 12 to 15 sessions. Oh, and how much are you paying for that? Oh, it's going to be, I think they said like $150. So $150 times 12. And all you're doing is just sitting there. So I'm like, okay, so let's just riddle me this. Where do you have your leakage symptom? Are you sitting? No. Are you lying down? No. I get my leakage when I stand and cough or stand and sneeze or stand and jump. Okay, so how is that chair that you're sitting on passively going to help you in a standing position? And you just get like the deer in the headlight look. And I'm not doing this because I'm like poo-pooing the person. And I'm not necessarily poo-pooing the provider so much. It's a bit of a shame on you for having this. I get it as a business that, oh, that's an easy cash-based service. But they're really doing the client a disservice. That for some folks, yes, having electrical stimulation to help reset that neuromotor connection of the pelvic floor muscles can be beneficial for those that have that weakness or have that kind of neuromotor difficulty. But we needed to assess the pelvic floor to really see if that's the issue. If it is somebody that has a tight muscle group, like I mentioned before, tightening up a already tight muscle group is going to make it worse. Also, for those that, over the course of the day, we only really voluntarily isolate that muscle group a small percentage of the day, right? How many times do you clear your throat, cough, or sneeze throughout the day? Not that much unless you're sick. So it's really a small percentage of the day that we really need to have an isolated Kegel to be performed. And that's why are we having a passive machine give us tens of thousands of muscle contraction when we don't even do that naturally or functionally? So I believe that technology for the chair is valid for certain applicable reasons and clinical applications. I think it's the application of that technology is what's wrong. I think the prescription of that particular product is incorrect when you're with a provider that has not done a pelvic exam, specifically an internal pelvic exam. So that's my little soapbox with them sitting chairs. And again, it's not the technology, right? Because there's biofeedback, there's other electrical stimulation things that help in muscle contractions. Absolutely. So I think the technology is valid. I just don't think how we apply it and the consumer education and marketing for it is incorrect. It really is. It's not appropriate and people really need to do better. But this is why I put these kind of podcasts out there so that way you are aware of, oh, this is interesting. Is that for me? Let me get a pelvic floor physical therapist to assess external, internal, any contributing factors to my pelvic symptom and go from there. And that pelvic floor physical therapist should be able to prescribe you what is appropriate for you. Is it muscle isolation, the contractions and activation of those Kegels? Is that what you really need? Do you need it in a sitting position? Do you need it in a all fours position? Do you need it in a standing position? Do we need to work on our endurance of that muscle group? Do we need to work on that fast twitch, that quick activation? Do we need to do it in functional activities? And so that's a big thing too. If I prescribe somebody a course of Kegels that is very prescriptive to what they need, but it's more that muscle isolation, we then relatively quickly, depending on consistency of the client performing it, by the next session, we should be seeing some good results or within the next few weeks, but I'm also tying it into function. So I'm like, hey, remember what that feels like. Get a little bit of biofeedback. We know what that feels like to turn on that muscle group in this way. Now, let's progress by maybe not necessarily the length of time that you fold it, but the position that you're folding it in. And we're going to then maybe add on some other external stressors like resistance, or we're going to do that within a squat. We're going to do that within like our planks. We're going to do that within, should we be doing this like with a certain kind of breath technique? Things like that. It ties it into my function so that we are really utilizing that muscle group in the best way and bring the more functional way of that daily use of the muscle group and not just in isolation. So that's like my 2 cents with Kegels or not to Kegel, is they do have a place. It is fewer than what people think. I'm in the DC metro area in Northern Virginia. We are all having a bit of a stressful moment here in 2025, in March of 2025 when I'm recording this. And we're type 1s, we're type A's. And so oftentimes I have to have people relax first before we can really isolate that muscle group. But I tend to do it more in a functional way than in pure isolation. But there are a few population of groups of people and situations that I will prescribe that. Another population that I prescribe isolation, depending on an exam, or for those that are status post or after a vasectomy. There is an amazing protocol that works on muscle activation and isolation in standing for those that are after a prostate removal. I also work with that. So not only like the immediate postpartum, the prostate surgeries, or even like radiations in the area sometimes. So it may be still there, but it was radiated. There's like just pure weakness, and we're working on muscle activation and strengthening for those living with prolapse. And we are maybe coupling that with a pessary or like a brace for the vaginal canal. And then underneath, we're working on those muscles to help continue to support that. So those are 3 kind of quick populations that I tend to, but again, that's all upon my evaluation. So if a prescriber or provider really is prescribing you with Kegels, please make sure they check an internal exam of your pelvic floor in multiple positions before they prescribe that. Make sure it's very clear, and certainly ask how are we going to progress this? Or I start here, and what's the next thing that we do? Make sure there is a plan, that it isn't just, oh, I'm sitting at each traffic light just doing my Kegels. Make sure there's a reason why. Make sure there's a purpose for that. It may be like initially, and then it gets progressed to a different position, a different hold, a different functional activity. That maybe sometimes I do prescribe that because it's just a really busy person, but their symptoms are in sitting. So I'm like, while you're sitting, but make sure we're not doing it on the toilet, because that's a single position that we do want to relax, and we don't want to do a Kegel. Okay? So there are reasons behind to Kegel and not to Kegel. And the debate here, and the discussion here, is make sure that someone checks that muscle group and really has a plan of progression for that muscle isolation. All right. So I love revisiting old topics, and I look forward to next time.